Michael Crichton's biggest novels, broadly speaking, had something of a formula. He would take academically minded professionals who could pontificate about big, cross-disciplinary scientific ideas, then throw them into pulpy science fiction adventure plots and settings that try to mash up the lowbrow violence and daring-do with whatever highbrow geeky research that had been catching Crichton's fancy at the time. This allowed Crichton to ruminate on the latest academic buzz or exciting new theories in between thrilling action set pieces, scratching this very specific itch for dumb, fun, yet intellectually engaging reads. For example, in Timeline, he mixed time travel by quantum tunneling to another dimension, where time moved a little bit slower, with a lot of facts about life and war and politics in 14th century France. Micro took a team of grad students with biochemistry and entomology specialties and shrunk them down for a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids adventure, looking at microbiodiversity and small-scale pharmacological sources in a book where a dude literally gets ripped apart by ants. Congo follows an expedition into the deep jungle where killer gorillas defend an ancient diamond mine, and the whole thing is wrapped up in characters waxing philosophical about the control and dissemination of communication technology and the nature of semiotics and symbols. And Jurassic Park is an adventure through a theme park full of clone dinosaurs that has more than a passing interest in systemic complexity and chaos theory.
I'm still not clear on chaos.
It simply deals with predictability in complex systems.
Like most of Crichton's research interests, chaos theory gets presented in a sort of consumable pop culture airport novella framing. That is, he doesn't focus on the mathematical proofs and the equations that drive actual research and understanding of complex systems, but instead uses a series of allegorical shorthands woven throughout the story to explain the concept. Just like Congo used training killer monkeys, a gorilla versed in sign language, and satellite-owning telecom firms to explore the nature and power of communications tech, Jurassic Park uses its setting and plot to explore how sufficiently complex systems defy human control or commodification. Basically, the book tries to make InGen and John Hammond in particular look like fools for claiming ownership and even authorship of the outcomes of systems that, over the course of the novel, they are shown to have no real understanding of, let alone any real meaningful power over. They make reductive assumptions about profoundly intricate systems in their hubris and greed, and as a result, systems operate in ways they don't foresee, leading to their failure and ultimately the deaths of a lot of people. I don't know if any of these systems in the book are necessarily mathematically provable as complex, chaotic systems, but it becomes apparent that they're supposed to be a stand-in for such systems. It's the whole reason Ian Malcolm is even in the novel, to allow Crichton to wax on about the nature of emergent behaviors and unforeseen consequences, because really, who invites a pure mathematician to review the safety of a theme park? Crichton wanted a fun, pulpy dinosaur adventure, but he also wanted to talk about systemic complexity and unpredictability. Take, for example, the computer systems that drive the park's automation. The book states that there's over 500,000 lines of code written basically by two people. No one can possibly hold the whole thing in their head, it's too complex, but superficially, it works.
You can run this whole park from this room with minimal staff for up to 3 days.
It turns out, though, that not only is that sort of automation not easy or cheap, it's dangerously complicated. Nedry has a hidden backdoor for himself, unbeknownst to anyone else, that manages to bring the whole park to its knees. The software looked like it behaved one way at a glance, and because of that, they thought they fully understood it, but they didn't really. They had a simplified view of a system where they didn't know all the details, but the details matter. One function, one method call can bring this thing you rely on down around you, and it did. And that's an idea that spans the entire book. Then there are the assumptions InGen makes about replicating and controlling a 65-million-year-old ecosystem.
Well, the question is, how can you know anything about an extinct ecosystem? And therefore, how could you ever assume that you can control it?
Their entire herd of Triceratops gets sick every 6 weeks, and they can't figure out why. They know there are poisonous lilac berries nearby, but they've never seen the animals eat them, so they dismiss them as the cause of the problem. It turns out while they don't intentionally eat the berries, the Triceratops in the novel have gizzard stones, rocks that they ingest and are held in the gizzard to aid in crushing up food. Once the stones are smooth, they spit them back out and eat new stones, and in the process consume a few berries that grow next to the ideally sized rocks, in a process that takes about 6 weeks. InGen thinks they know what these animals consume and that that's enough, but that isn't enough. Again, it's a simplified view of their digestive habits that reduces its complexity down to, I don't know, they don't seem to eat the poison stuff. There's even examples that combine the ecosystem assumptions and the computer system assumptions. The belief that the animals lacked the ability to breed led to their automated animal counting system to max out at the expected number of animals, and the belief that their automated counting system was 100% accurate caused them to miss the fact that they were breeding in the wild for years. And then there's the biggest example in the novel, the genetic engineering of the dinosaurs themselves, perhaps the novel's best example of toying with complex systems that one can influence but not truly control or predict. Henry Wu mentions to John Hammond that they bought a lot of stun prods and electrified nets to control the animals, under the assumption they were sort of the lumbering, slow behemoths that popular culture conceived them as. But that was before they had successfully cloned anything, and once they had, it was revealed that they were far too fast for that equipment to work. They were operating from models that didn't reflect reality. Alan Grant realizes that the amphibian DNA they added to the hadrosaurs gave them motion-based vision like other amphibians after accidentally scaring one a few times in a tree. It isn't presented as a natural fact of hadrosaur biology, but a side effect of genetic tampering. Similarly, that amphibian DNA is what accounted for the ability of the animals to change sex and breed. All of these are unforeseen outcomes, examples of scientists changing variables but unaware of what they will do. Living, breathing organisms are complex entities built out of an intricate genetic code, and the work done to fix their samples was guesswork that no one followed up on the implications of. Again, it's unclear whether these systems can be properly called complex or even chaotic, but it's clear that InGen and John Hammond routinely used reductive models to make assumptions about what they were doing, and that was the cause of their downfall. It wasn't a deep academic or particularly profound look at what is mostly a mathematical concept, but for a pulpy story about Dinosaur Island, it did have a fun thinking man's airport novella thing going on. When we get to the film, all of this stuff about chaos theory and systemic complexity and trying to assert ownership over something you don't fully understand is mostly tossed out the window. First, the West Indian lilac berries that poison the trikes are no longer what poisons the trikes. I guess the gizzard stone stuff was too gross or unbelievable or would take too long to explain, so the sick Triceratops' illness remains a mystery in the film that never really gets resolved.
You're right. There's no trace of lilac berries. It's so odd, though. Alright.
But we still have the scene with the sick Triceratops because we need to get Ellie away from the group for the T-Rex attack, but the point the scene made in the book about reductive views of the trike's digestive habits is missing, and at least you could argue that was rightly cut for time. The genetic modifications leading to the hadrosaurs having motion-based vision, on the other hand, gets completely rewritten to having the T-Rex just having motion-based vision and painting that as scientific fact, which...
You keep still because you think that maybe his visual acuity is based on movement, like T-Rex, and he'll lose you if you don't move, but no.
Really bugs me even to this day. And even the frog DNA leading to fertile dinosaurs is brushed over more with a mystical life finds a way aspect than really recognizing it as a failure on the part of the geneticists. In the book, it's a systemic oversight by scientists. In the film, biological life has force powers, I guess.
Malcolm was right. Look. Life found a way.
Really, all that remains of the chaos theory discussion proper in the film are a few one-liners by Ian Malcolm snarkily suggesting that he can scientifically prove that the plot's about to unfold.
Boy, do I hate being right all the time.
Ultimately, it becomes more of a branding angle for the whole franchise than anything. Jurassic Park chaos effect toys, or a throwaway line in a Weird Al song.
I admit it's kinda eerie, but this proves my chaos theory.
In place of the chaos theory stuff, instead, is a similar but way more vague theme of control. Control over animals schedules, over people, over computer systems, over legal challenges, over the weather. Jurassic Park is John Hammond's hubris writ large. He famously spared no expense. And yet he fails utterly to control every one of these things.
It's all an illusion.
When we have control again.
You never had control. That's the illusion.
His dinosaurs don't show up for his dinosaur tour, then they escape, his employees betray him, his computer systems collapse, his expert witnesses won't vouch for the park, but his greedy lawyer will, and a tropical storm swings by to ruin the first tour and screw everything up. If the novel was about making reductive models of complex systems, resulting in each misbehavior or caveat slowly spinning the entire park careening towards doom, the movie is about a man's attempt to control these giant impossible forces he has no claim to and failing utterly. A classic Icarian story about a man who flew too close to the sun. And also, for some reason, Alan Grant learning to want to be a dad, because it isn't a Steven Spielberg movie if there isn't some dad stuff in there somewhere, but that's not really related to what we're talking about. But the point is, the film lies the blame for Jurassic Park's failure not on systemic complexity and reductive models thereof, but on the mistakes and hubris of one man. There's a reason the Trespasser developers had Sir Richard Attenborough record Percy Shelley's Ozymandias as John Hammond.
My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair.
And all of that finally brings me to today's game. I was pretty down on Jurassic World Evolution when it was announced because I had played Operation Genesis and, well...
So, God help us, we're in the hands of engineers.
While a Zoo Tycoon game featuring dinosaurs is cool, who doesn't like dinosaurs, I feel it's kind of antithetical to the franchise. The point of Tycoon games is to make money by building the right stuff in the right places and charging the right prices to bring enough people in to unlock the next thing to build more stuff around. The point of a Tycoon game is not, and as far as I can tell has never been, to posit that your enterprise is fundamentally untenable because of complexity or hubris. I started to reconsider my negative attitude, however, when I saw the final Jurassic World Evolution trailer.
You think that things are going to turn out differently, huh? Well, the ones before you did too. And what makes us such unique creatures is knowing the scope and power of what we're up against and still believing that we can win. I know, however, what I would predict.
It seemed to get that Jurassic Park, in both its novel and film forms, is something that is a very bad idea. And you know me at this point. A Tycoon game with actual themes based on a property I can't shut up about sounded so up my alley. So, how's it do? Well, for one, Jurassic World Evolution is pretty terrible about exploring genetic engineering as a chaotic system of unknown outcomes. The idea of organic biology as a complex, uncontrollable system bores the game. It wants you to play genetic engineer to cobble together monsters. You have complete visibility into every stat, and upgrades have clearly stated pros and cons for your dinosaur. The irreducibly complex system of genetic code, biology, and animal behavior has been turned into a straightforward RPG upgrade tree. You want orange dinosaurs? Research the orange dinosaur upgrade, then click the orange dinosaurs button, and you got yourself some orange dinosaurs. You think they need to be more aggressive? Research the aggression genes, then click and apply those. The default gene options are listed as null genes, even though the icon clearly indicates that they came from frogs. I guess in this game's universe, frog DNA is just universally average and applicable to everything. But given the context of the frog DNA as the source of a lot of the errors in the book, it strikes me as weird. Regardless, the terrifying power of genetic engineering is made your straightforward plaything, and the game doesn't really comment on that very much. But in other ways, it keeps the ideas of making reductive assumptions about systems very much alive. They're almost certainly not chaotic systems, the game simply isn't that complex, but it does spend time intentionally setting up traps for you, trying to make you overstep your knowledge or support structures. The game isn't interested in ideas of chaos theory and complex systems, nor the idea of a single man's hubris and downfall. Instead, it's interested in getting you to feel like you're John Hammond, to make terrifyingly bad assumptions or over-leverage your resources or ignore key staff, leading to a systemic failure in the park that is ultimately on your head. And it can get you to fall into these traps pretty regularly if you're not careful. For example, in the opening level, you get access to a Struthiomimus and a Triceratops pretty early, and your very next dinosaur is likely to be a Ceratosaur, a carnivore. The opening level provides you with just one giant paddock. Paddocks are very expensive, and money in the beginning of the game is pretty tight, so you may just be inclined to throw a Ceratosaur out there with your Struths and your Trikes, especially if you provide it with a meat feeder unit. Why would it pick a fight when it could feed? Well, it turns out you can't just suppress 65 million years of gut instinct, and as soon as my Ceratosaur was free, it killed one Struthiomimus and one Triceratops before my younger Trike killed her. On one hand, the carnivores are more than a little bit unrealistically kill-happy, but all the same I couldn't believe I had made such an obvious mistake. In the interest of saving money, and because I wanted a carnivorous attraction now, goddammit, I had released a ferocious predator into an environment where it ate two of my prized and expensive animals. And as the helicopters carried off the carcasses of the two dead animals, I could only think of one thing.
You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
the good news is on the second level they start you with two pens. And that's great, one for herbivores and one for a small pack of carnivores to bring the guests in. Except I hadn't paid attention to the Ceratosaur's environmental preferences, and it grew frustrated with its water and forest-heavy preserve, preferring open plains to hunt in. After growing unhappy and restless in its environment, it decided to break free for greener pastures. But, and here's where the game had me kicking myself, Even though this level started with 2 pens, it doesn't start with an asset control unit capable of tranquilizing the dinosaurs, which the first level did start with. And I had, in my rush to get the park profitable by filling it with dinosaurs, failed to notice that or to build one, and spent so much money bringing the dinosaurs to life, I didn't have the 400 grand in the budget to go build one now that I desperately needed it. And the thing about dinosaur theme parks where the alarms are tripped, the guests are in shelters, and the dinosaurs are on the loose is that no one is spending any money. So I was stuck with a rampaging ceratosaur and no way to stop it. This was basically a failure state and I had to restart the island.
After careful consideration, I've decided not to endorse your park. So have I.
Then there was my attempt at cloning velociraptors. As one of the 2 most popular carnivores from the film, who wouldn't want to clone them as soon as possible? But they're expensive, pens are expensive, meat feeders are more expensive than plant feeders, and the act of cloning a velociraptor alone runs almost $700,000, and that's before you add additional genetic modifications to make them pretty or more aggressive. Still, I had the paddock set up for one of them, I had an animal control unit this time, I had the cash to afford one. What could possibly go wrong? Well, one of the things the game does to encourage failure is that it hides animal preferences until they're released. You can make assumptions about what kind of environment they're probably going to want, but until they're alive, until they're sitting in a paddock responding to this area you've built for them, you don't know. And it turns out, in a massive oversight on my part, I forgot that raptors are pack hunters. They expect to be released into a social group of multiple raptors. I had made one raptor, the loneliest raptor, the most ill-content, angriest raptor. It took her a few minutes, but soon after she was released, she was regularly attacking the fences, escaping, and chasing down the crowds. I was able to use my helicopter to tranquilize her and move her back into the pen and then repair the fences, but I had shut down the park by sending guests to shelters in an attempt to save lives, and in the process cut off my funding. I didn't have enough to produce a second velociraptor, so my poor angry animal continued to rebel, over and over again, escaping, looking for a companion that would never come. In the end, I had to sell her off, with the somber realization that I hadn't just failed the dead people in my park, I had also failed her as well. These failures, and the other ones I've made along the way, are kind of a cross-section of both the book and the film's themes. They involve me making simplified assumptions about systems I don't fully understand, yes, but I also don't think they're properly complex or chaotic emergent behaviors, just hidden until I realize my mistake, and then I don't make that mistake again. They also emphasize that you don't truly have control over these animals or your employees. When disgruntled teams sabotage your power or storms rage with such force that buildings are damaged and animals panic, it reaffirms the film's stance that, well,
You never had control. That's the illusion.
But it does so in half-hearted ways that inconvenience the player but rarely belies that they have no true control. Jurassic World Evolution isn't really interested in exploring either the film or the book's ideas too deeply. When animals do get loose and people die, there aren't lawsuits, there aren't Costa Rican regulators stepping in, the park isn't at risk for being shut down for safety concerns. Instead, your park rating drops lower for a little bit, which pushes back unlocking the next island. You make a little bit less money for a few minutes, and then everything recovers after things stabilize. The primal carnage the game teases is the inevitable outcome of your attempts to play God. The horrific truth hiding beneath the veneer of a family theme park is quiet and bloodless. Really, it's mostly just a standard tycoon game that occasionally sets up traps to remind you,
Now you're John Hammond.
In the end, though, I find myself perplexed by Jurassic World Evolution. As a tycoon game, it isn't great. Far too much time is spent sitting around waiting for your coffers to fill in order to build the next paddock or hotel. The lack of money is necessary to be able to trap you in these situations where things go terribly awry and you can't just spend your way out of them, but it leaves you with not much to do a lot of the time. It's such a problem that there are multiple systems to distract you during these waiting periods. You can complete contracts to improve your ratings with each faction of the company, or take photographs of the dinosaurs for some quick cash, or manage your fossil excavations and subsequent genetic acquisition. The game feels at times like a series of disparate systems that don't intersect in meaningful ways. You also can't customize buildings, and the limitations on your build space are claustrophobic for a game based on an entire island. Also, and this is more of a fanboy complaint, you can't recreate Jurassic Park proper. All of the art assets are clearly inspired by Jurassic World. The lack of a Jurassic Park Visitor Center is the biggest oversight since the Star Trek Bridge game ignored the Next Generation. There's no building a path for a 1993 Ford Explorer to drive guests around in, you don't get to place the big wooden gate, and the classic Velociraptor pen is absent for a lot of reasons in this game. Honestly, in a lot of ways, it feels like a really hard to get to dinosaur zoo rather than Jurassic Park. All footpaths and forgettable fast food buildings next to steel cages that don't even give off a good klaxon, and until the end of the game aren't even electrified like in the film. Alas, my dream of pretending to be John Arnold or Dennis Nedry and running an entire theme park's worth of security systems, automated trams, and animal control from my desk goes unfulfilled. And also, the metaphors the game uses begin to strain credulity. Like, you're not opening Jurassic World Hollywood, Jurassic World Orlando, and Jurassic World Shanghai. You're opening 6 different Jurassic Worlds, each on its own island about 200 miles west of Costa Rica and separated maybe by a couple dozen miles. Also, while I love the idea of keeping your employees happy by engaging with separate factions whose competing interests can change the direction of the park, the fact that you get bonuses for completing contracts for them, and that it's a pretty huge portion of your income and rewards you with new buildings and upgrades, makes no sense. Like, I love the idea if you neglect your scientists or your park operations staff or security or whatever, and they get disgruntled and undermine you, it feeds into those notions of control and systems where you can't fully predict the outcome of your actions. But the implementation here is super contrived, and it feels more like having 3 bosses than having to take responsibility for your employees. You aren't the leader of the ship trying to keep the crew marching towards one unified goal, you are a dinosaur zoo planner serving 3 separate masters. The point is, other than the drop-dead gorgeous dinosaurs, it doesn't function as a traditional tycoon game. It doesn't do what these games are supposed to do. But as a sort of anti-tycoon game, a game that tries to convey the sense that the parks it asks you to build might in some way be a mistake.
And now we reach the inevitable. Life begets death. But here's the question that you gotta ask yourself, was this avoidable?
It's almost refreshing. The tycoon genre is one that too often finds itself thoughtlessly coddling capitalist ideals of nigh infinite expansion, technological progress, and profits. Jurassic World Evolution tries to step back from that, though it doesn't quite stick the landing. Its criticisms are too shallow and unremarked upon to leave you anything to think about. Its violence is too bloodless to let you realize the power and horror you've unleashed, and at the end of the day, it's still about expansion and wealth acquisition by treating living things as commodities.
I know these animals are considered product, but don't treat them that way.
This is must-see BC, right? That should mean an increase in revenue, which is always the true measure of success.
You'll screw up, people will die, Jeff Goldblum will go, I gotcha, and then 10 minutes later, it's like nothing happened. And that lack of impact is a damn shame because I feel like it's an otherwise interesting attempt to make a genre try to say something, or to impart a feeling, which is more than I can say for most other tycoon games on the market. It got me, a Jurassic Park nerd who thought with my knowledge of dinosaurs and theme parks there was no way I could make Hammond's mistakes, to fall into multiple traps. The game managed to repeatedly humble me, and that's cool. But each time it asked me to dust my pants off and try again, and that is where it fails. Ultimately, Jurassic World Evolution's heart isn't in making a statement, either about themes of chaos and control, or even just what it feels like to be John Hammond. It is, at the end of the day, a tycoon game where you can unlock content and dinosaurs and genetic research and complete all the challenges and see all the cool things. And what's cool about dinosaurs is that sometimes they eat people. The horror you unleash is a feature, not a bug. Hell, there are missions from your security staff to release the animals just to see what happens. The game likes to talk tough about how you're irresponsible for doing what you're doing, but the game's heart is ultimately in support of trying again and again until you get it right and make a perfect park that makes you a buttload of money. But Jurassic Park doesn't end with a functional park that makes people a buttload of money and keeps people safe. That's the whole point. And in missing that, it undoes much of what its otherwise rather unique systems design sets out to do.